So, the book of Judges follows the book of Joshua. In the book of Joshua, they're conquering the promised land. But if you pay attention carefully in the book of Joshua, there's unfinished business. They didn't conquer every single nook and cranny. There's places left to be conquered. God told them that the reason he's going to leave these places to be conquered is because he wants to test them. He wants to keep them battle ready, and he wants to see if they really love God. The book of Judges gets its name from the leaders, which were called judges. They can be everything from warriors, prophets. There's a woman who's a judge. The book of Judges is a very messy book. We're going to say this, you're going to hear me and Caleb say this over and over again, because that's one of the words I want to get into our head. Judges, messy. It's messy. It's like this kind of messy.
What are you doing?
Remember this video from a couple weeks ago?
What are you doing?
I know.
What have you been doing to your brother?
I know.
You don't know?
I just grabbed him.
Well, she covered her brother in peanut butter. It's horribly messy. Now, the videos that I pick are kind of cute. They're cutesy little videos. Oh, that's so cute. I just love it. Of course, if you were the mother's baby, you're kind of laughing and crying at the same time, because then you got to clean it all up. The book of Judges is going to go from cutesy, messy, to nightmare, messy. And we're about halfway to it along the line. It gets worse and worse and worse as we get on until the very last chapters are absolutely horrendous. They're like Silence of the Lambs messy. I mean, it's horrible. You're going to see that God uses very flawed people. One of the key verses at the very last verse in the book says, in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. That's why it's so messy, because everybody's doing things their way. They're doing Frank Sinatra, I did it my way kind of a thing. We've noted that the books are not in chronological order. That'll help. There are sections where there's groups of stuff together. That's chronological order. Gideon obviously is a chronological section, but don't think that Samson is necessarily chronologically afterwards. Don't think that the things at the end where they're chopping up the prostitute into 12 pieces is necessarily chronological. That's actually something we think is earlier in the history. That's a whole other story. The last couple of weeks, we've seen how God has used a man named Gideon. He was filled with all kinds of fears, and he's a bit flawed himself. And yet he still looks for God to help him, to guide him. And as a result, he's going to take a tiny group of 300 men and face 135,000 Midianites. That's an amazing thing. Absolutely. And I actually have actual footage of the battle. I'll show you the whole thing. It's very gory. This is from the movie 300, which is about the battle at Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans faced, I don't know, it was 1 million or so Persians. It's not really Gideon's. In fact, Gideon's men, they were the original 300. They actually predate Leonidas by 700 some years. And no, the battle didn't look anything like the Spartans. Gideon's men are equipped with trumpets, torches, clay pots. They put the torches in the clay pots. They surround the enemy at night. They break the clay pots, and suddenly light explodes, and they blow the trumpets, and they say, the sword of the Lord and Gideon. The Midians freak out, and they start turning on each other. Judges 7 ends with the Israelites chasing the Midianites across, here's the Jordan River. And see, the battle takes place right between the hill of Morah and Ein Harod. And when we're there well, I don't have the pictures, but when you're there at Ein Harod, when you visit Israel, you look across the valley. It's like 3 miles away, and you can see the hill of Morah where all this takes place. It's all within, they're watching the Midianites gather. The Midianites are watching them. This is no secret thing where they're charging and surprised. They all see each other. Now, as chapter 7 ends with them chasing the Midianites across the Jordan River, Gideon will ask the tribe of Ephraim to join the fight, and Ephraim will join the fight. Ephraim will kill 2 of the princes of Midian. And we're going to start in chapter 8. Now the men of Ephraim said to him, "Why have you done this to us by not calling us when you went to fight with the Midianites?" And they reprimanded him sharply. "Why have you done this to us?" They're so upset. "You should have invited us to the battle. You know, it's just no fair. Now you're telling us as the battle is progressing, why so late? This is no fair." Some people, no matter what you do, are never satisfied. Have you noticed that? No matter how good you do, no matter how sharp you are, no matter how smart you are, no matter how strong you are, some people are just never satisfied. This elderly couple was having trouble with forgetfulness. And so they go to their doctor, and the doctor says, "Well, why don't you try writing down everything so you remember?" So one evening, Grandma asked Grandpa if he would like some ice cream. "Well, sure, that sounds good, but you'd better write it down." "Oh, no," Grandma says, "I can remember that. Would you like syrup on top?" Yeah, but you'd better write it down." "Oh, I can remember that. How about some nuts on top?" "Oh, yeah, but you better write it down." She says, "Well, what about whipped cream?" "Oh, yeah, but you better write it down." She says, "Oh, no, I can remember this." So she goes into the kitchen, and she's there for a long time. Finally, Grandpa goes in, and he asks her what's taking her so long. She says, "Look, I made you bacon and eggs. I made you bacon and eggs." And Grandpa says, "I told you to write it down. I wanted toast also." People are never satisfied. Now, from the human perspective, the Ephraimites might have a good point. I mean, couldn't Gideon have done a better job if they were with him at the very beginning? But see, they missed the point. Because God wanted Gideon to only have 300 men. He sent home, 31,700 men, or 30,700 men. He sent them home because God only wanted a very few so that God would get the glory. Be careful, my friends, that you don't catch yourself being in the camp of the person who's always finding fault. You want to be careful. God may be wanting to do something that's just above your understanding. So you want to be careful. Verse 2. So he said to them, "What have I done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer?" Now he's from the family of Abiezer. And so he's saying, just the leftover grapes in your vineyards are much better than like the best wine of my family. God has delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeeb, and what was I able to do in comparison with you? Then their anger toward him subsided when he said that. Now, so he's just saying, look, your worst is better than our best. You guys are just awesome. You guys are just amazing. I just love this. He's such a schmoozer. and on top of this, they got Oreb and Zeeb. These were the two princes that they actually killed. And this is a picture. This is, I think, a good example of what we would call peaceful words. Proverbs 15:1 says, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." I think that's a great example. You can choose words when you're in an argument. You can choose words that are going to stir stuff up, or you can quiet things down and use quieter words and back down the tone a little bit. Some of that's up to us. We can't control everything, but you have some control. Verse 4. When Gideon came to the Jordan, he and the 300 men who were with him crossed over, exhausted but still in pursuit. So of Gideon's 300 men, how many of them are still around? All 300 of them. I think that's amazing. They're exhausted, but they're still with him. Then he said to the men of Sukkot, "Please give bread to the people who follow me, for they are exhausted, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, kings of Midian." Now, Sukkot, we're going to see in a minute, is a little town on the eastern side, the other side of the Jordan River. And Gideon's just looking for some help for his troops. They've gone probably a little farther than he expected. And he's still got these two kings to catch, Zebah and Zalmunna, verse 6. And the leaders of Sukkot said, "Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread to your army?" Now, the people of Sukkot think that Gideon is just in over his head. And they, after all, live on the other side of the Jordan, so they're always facing the Midianites. They're the first one that they're going to attack. And we think you just kind of bit off a little more than you can chew. And if we help you, the Midianites are going to come back and burn us. We're going to be in trouble. And so they don't want to get involved. Verse 7. So Gideon said, for this cause, when the Lord has delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, then I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and the briars. Now there's a little bit of contrast with the peaceful words, huh? I didn't quite use the peaceful words there. I don't know if it's because there's a time to be a peacemaker and there's time to be firm with people. I don't know. Or maybe he's just tired and grumpy. I don't know. So verse 8, then he went up from there to Penuel, which is something in the life of Jacob. I won't go, that's another rabbit trail. And he spoke to them in the same way. And the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Sukkot had answered him. So this is a little further up a valley. We'll see in a minute. And these guys don't want to help either. It's like, we're not going to help you. We know the Midianites better than you do. So he also spoke to the men of Penuel, saying, when I come back in peace, I will tear down this tower. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were at Karkor, and their armies with them about 15,000, all who were left of all the army of the people of the east, for 120,000 men who drew the sword had fallen. Now, here's where we come up with the idea that the Midianites were a total of 135. It's from this verse, 135,000. Because at this point, they've got 15,000 left. We're told that 120,000 have been killed. So that comes up with our 135,000. Verse 11, then Gideon went up by the road of those who dwell in the tents on the east of Nobah and Jogbehah. And it sounds like something from Star Wars, doesn't it? Jogbehah. And he attacked the army while the camp was secure. Now, here's a map. So Gideon has come. Here's the Jezreel Valley that lies right in here is the Jezreel Valley. He comes from the Jezreel Valley, goes down the Jordan, crosses is over at Sukkot, then to Penuel, and then he goes up the road. And this is all in modern Jordan right now. And so they're up around Jogbehah. And it says he attacked while the camp felt secure. The Midianites weren't expecting. They thought, hey, we kind of strolled down and we just we got away from those guys. Whew, boy, didn't we show them. And so they're all bedded down for the night. They weren't even expecting. And there shows up Gideon. Verse 12. When Zebah and Zalmunna fled, he pursued them and he took the two kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and routed the whole army. So when we think about Gideon's victory, you want to be careful that you don't think it was all about in the last chapter where the Midianites all turned against each other, that they just freaked them out and they all turned and killed each other. Because here, his 300 still take on 15,000. So maybe they were a little more like the Spartans than we would say, even though, but still, 300 versus 15,000, those are still pretty good. That's an amazing thing. Verse 13, then Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from battle from the ascent of Heres, and he caught a young man of the men of Sukkot and interrogated him. And he wrote down for him the leaders of Sukkot and its elders, 77 men. And he came to the men of Sukkot and said, here are Zebah and Zalmunna. They said, well, where's Zebah and Zalmunna? He said, well, here they are, about whom you ridiculed me, saying, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand? We should give bread to your weary men. And he took the elders of the city and the thorns and the wilderness and the briars, and with them he taught the men of Sukkot. He whipped them. He whipped them with branches of thorn bushes. Don't mess with Gideon. Verse 17. Then he tore down the tower of Penuel and killed the men of the city. So that was that second city that wouldn't help him. And he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, what kind of men were they whom you killed at Tabor? That's back in the Jezreel Valley. So they answered, as you are, so were they. Each one resembled the son of a king. Now, I think the idea is that these leaders, Zebah and Zalmunna, at some point, they captured some leaders, and just as Gideon's about to do, they killed the leaders of Israel. that they'd captured. And they say, well, what they're basically saying is they kind of looked a lot like you. You know, sons of a king, like you, is the reference. Then he said, they were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As the Lord lives, if you had let them live, I would not kill you. And he said to Jether, his firstborn, rise, kill them. But the youth would not draw his sword, for he was afraid, because he was still a youth. So Zebah and Zalmunna said, rise yourself and kill us, for as a man is, so is his strength. They're kind of daring him. So Gideon arose and killed Zebah and Zalmunna and took the crescent ornaments that were on their camels' necks. Those are idolatrous ornaments. So verse 22. How's this for messy? Is this messy enough for you? Huh? It's messy enough? Okay, verse 22. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, rule over us, both you and your son, and your grandson also, for you have delivered us from the hand of Midian. But Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you, for the Lord shall rule over you. So the Israelites are overwhelmed with gratitude for what Gideon's done. They're just blown away. And they're thinking, what better thing can we do than, hey, let's make this guy king. Now, they've never had a king. But why not? Let's make this guy king over us. Gideon is smart enough to know that even though God has led him into the battle, God has not led him to be king. God led him into the battle. He knew that. He knew what God told him to do, but God has not told him to be king. And the lesson here is about knowing your calling. We talked about this on Sunday, about how God has plans for each of us. God has a calling for each of us. Ephesians 2:10, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. But like Gideon, it's not uncommon for people to try to put us into places that we don't belong. I think you ought to be here. And sometimes they're right. They can be right. There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes people like to push others into places that God has not called them to do. It was following the 1929 stock crash. An out-of-work stockbroker finally lands a job at the winter quarters of a circus in Peru, Indiana, and he asked the manager if he had any jobs. The manager said, well, we only have one job. I don't think you'd be interested in it. The salesman said he'd take anything. He was so hungry. I mean, this is the Depression. Well, said the manager, we're looking for someone to wear Nellie's skin, and I don't think that would interest you. What are you talking about, said the stockbroker. Nellie, replied the manager, was our pet gorilla and our most popular attraction. After Nellie died, we tried to buy another gorilla, but there's no gorillas available. So we finally skinned Nellie and want someone to put on her skin and take her place in the cage. Well, how much does that job pay, said the salesman. $25 a week and board, was the reply. Mister, we're wasting a lot of time. Where's the skin? So, turns out that the salesman made a better gorilla than even old Nellie did. He hopped around the cage, and everybody that saw him went away going, wow, have you seen Nellie? More people come. And before long, it's the most popular attraction at the circus. At which point the manager comes along and says to the broker, boy, you've done such a swell job that I'm going to raise your salary to $35 a week and board. Well, this really gets the broker excited, and he's hopping all around the cage like he's never hopped before. In fact, he hops so much that he hits the trap door at the end of the cage, falls through to the next cage. As the door clangs behind him, he looks over at the corner, and there lies, where is he? A big old lion. The lion opens his eyes and blinks. The broker scrambles up to the side of the cage on that little trap seat up in the corner, hangs on for dear life. The lion gets up slowly and took a couple of steps towards him, then crouches like he's about to spring. The gorilla was shaking in fear so much the bars were rattling. He closes his eyes because he thought, this is it. Then the lion says, what are you so scared about, big boy? You think you're the only stockbroker in this circus? Hey, Greg Laurie tells that joke. So it's got to be an okay joke, right? Okay, follow me. I think a mark of maturity is learning to be comfortable in your own skin. In your own skin. You know, David tried on Saul's armor when he was facing Goliath. Saul said, "Here, use my armor." And David was sharp enough to realize, this doesn't fit me. This isn't mine. This isn't going to work. Know your calling. Find your calling. Flow in your calling. Be blessed in your calling. And just know that when you step out of your calling, well, that's probably not where you belong. Find your calling. Verse 24. Then Gideon said to them, "I would like to make a request of you, that each of you would give me the earrings from his plunder." For they had gold earrings because they were Ishmaelites. So they answered, "Oh, we'll gladly give them." And they spread out a garment, and each man threw into it the earrings from his plunder. So, you know, they've killed all these guys, and as they're killing the guys, they go back and they're plucking all the earrings off of these guys. Okay. Now, the weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, beside the crescent ornaments, pendants, and purple robes which were on the kings of Midian, and beside the chains that were around their camels' necks. Ladies, how about that? Their camels were wearing gold chains. How about that? Did Camille wear a gold chain on your camel at the retreat? I don't think so. Okay, sorry. Never mind. So, 1,700 shekels. So these Midianites, Ishmaelites, they've got rings. I don't know if they got tattoos. They probably have tattoos. New Living Translation puts this as 43 pounds of gold. But keep in mind, this is 135,000 men's earrings and nose rings and whatever. Now, is it right for Gideon to ask for this? 43 pounds of gold. The Bible says that the workman is worthy of his wage. So there's that, you know, and he did an amazing thing. But I just kind of wonder, we're going to see, if not at this point, Gideon's going to go a little too far. He's going to get messy. Verse 27, then Gideon made it into an ephod and set it up in his city, Ophrah. And all Israel played the harlot with it there. It became a snare to Gideon and to his house. He made it into an ephod. An ephod is technically a priestly garment. It could be something like a robe made out of linen. Some have suggested all kinds of other possibilities. Exactly what it is, there's some dispute, quite a bit of dispute. I was amazed at the different ideas. Sometimes an ephod is connected to getting answers from God. When David was running from Saul, he said to Ahimelech the priest, "Bring the ephod here," because Ahimelech the priest had, or is it Abimelech? I think it was Ahimelech. He had escaped with an ephod, we're told. And so he brings the ephod to David, and then David starts asking questions to God, and God apparently answers through somehow the usage of this thing called an ephod. Some have suggested that maybe it's similar to the priest's breastplate that he wore that had the Urim and the Thummim, and how all that worked is a mystery. I don't think it's the magic glasses of Joseph Smith, but it's some way of telling God's will, something like that. And it is possible, quite a few commentators suggest that Gideon's reason for doing this is simply as a way of memorializing or commemorating this victory. This is the trophy of what God did here, you know. And so here's all the gold from the Midianites. Maybe it's something like that. But the people are going to take it way overboard. And they start, it says they played the harlot with it. They're starting to worship it. And going to it rather than going to God. Instead of going to God whose tabernacle, I believe, was still at Shiloh. And I think the lesson from this incident somewhere towards the end of Gideon's life is to finish well. It's important that when we are facing crises, battles, difficulties, 135,000 Midianites, it's important that we do well, that we're seeking God, that we're asking His direction, that we're doing what He wants to do. But when the battle's over, we're not done. When the battle's over, we still need to finish our race. And there's still going to be battles ahead. There's situations ahead. And we want to make sure that we finish the race well, which is to the day that we get to see Jesus. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 9, he says, "Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate or self-controlled in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we an imperishable crown." Now back in Paul's day, the winner of the Olympics games would win a wreath made out of olive branches. That was their crown, their perishable crown. Later on they'd come up with the gold and silver and those kinds of things. But at this point it's something that would just waste away. Therefore, Paul says, "I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air." I'm in this to win it. He says, "But I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified." And so one of the lessons we want to learn from Gideon is to learn to finish well. Think about Noah. Noah did an awesome, amazing thing. He saved the world in a sense because he and his family made it through the flood. We wouldn't be alive today if it weren't for Noah. And yet at the end of his life, he gets stinking drunk and messes up, and it's messy. God wants us to finish the race well. He wants to run all the way to the end. This golden ephod is part of Gideon's messiness. Verse 28. Yet, verse 28, "Thus Midian was subdued before the children of Israel, so that they lifted their heads no more. And the country was quiet for 40 years in the days of Gideon." Quiet for 40 years. This is going to be the last time there's peace in Israel through the periods of the judges. The next couple judges, Jephthah and Samson, will not bring a period of peace. So, verse 29. "Then Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. Gideon had 70 sons who were his own offspring, for he had many wives, and his concubine who was in Shechem also bore him a son whose name he called Abimelech." One of these sons, Abimelech. Melech is the Hebrew word for king, Melech. Abba is the word for what? Abba, father, daddy, yeah. When you add an I at the end of a Hebrew word, it makes it possessive. My Abba. My daddy is king. My daddy is king. That's what he got to go around to. My name is Abimelech. My daddy is king. Now, we didn't really make him king, but my daddy is king. Abimelech. Now, and by the way, who's Jerubbaal? It says Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. What? Who's that? Who's Jerubbaal? Come on. That's Gideon's nickname. It's Gideon's nickname. His daddy gave him the nickname when he tore down the altar of Baal. Yes. So that's just his nickname. Same guy. So apparently Gideon had 70 legitimate children from his many wives. But Abimelech, who is listed as the son of a concubine, Josephus even gives us her name. She's called Drumma. I don't know. Drumma as opposed to guitar player. She's the drummer. No, I'm so sorry. But because Abimelech's the son of a concubine, he doesn't have this full status of one of the other 70 sons. Apparently that's the idea here. And we're going to see Abimelech a little more in the next chapter. In fact, a whole lot more. By the way, 70 wives is again part of Gideon's messiness. This is not God's original plan for marriage. If you want to know God's original plan for marriage, it's not one man and 70 many wives. It's one man and one wife, because God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Eve and Esther and Abigail and blah, 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 blah. That's just one man, one woman. Verse 32. Now Gideon, the son of Joash, died at a good old age and was buried in the tomb of Joash his father in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. And so it was, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel again played the harlot with the Baals and made Baal Berit their god. Baal Berit. Berit means covenant. Baal is, you think of Baal, or I may slip and call it Baal, but that's okay because that's just old habits. Baal or Baal means Lord, and sometimes it's actually translated Lord or husband. But we think of it, it's normally a god of the Philistines. In fact, Baal Berit is a Philistine little g god. And the worship of Baal in the Old Testament, there's actually many forms of Baal. And oftentimes there's a localized version of Baal depending on the city that is worshiping Baal. So you'll see all kinds of different forms of Baal. This is Baal Berit. Thus, verse 34, the children of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hands of all their enemies on every side, nor did they show kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, Gideon, in accordance with the good he had done for them. So one more time, the cycle starts all over again, from following to falling away, difficulty, and then repenting. And so now they're in the falling away stage. Chapter 9. I'm going to do 2 chapters, 2 long chapters tonight. Okay, verse 1. Then Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal. So here is Abimelech now. He's the son of the concubine. He went to Shechem, to his mother's brothers. Because where's he from? Remember? Last chapter, verse 31. His mother was in Shechem. So he goes back home. He goes to Shechem, to his mother's brothers, and spoke with them and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, please speak in the hearing of all the men of Shechem, which is better for you, that all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal reign over you, or that one reign over you? Remember that I am your own flesh and bone. Now again, remember Jerubbaal is another name for Gideon. Okay. And he goes back to Shechem. Shechem is actually an ancient city back all the way to the time way before Judges. It goes back to the days of Jacob and earlier. And notice, as we zoom in, notice the hills around Shechem. And we're going to see more of that from a different view. The city dates back to the time of Jacob. Jacob, when he came back with his wives and his kids, he settled in Shechem for a while. The city had been built by a man named Hamor, and he named the city after his own son named Shechem. This is back in Genesis 33. This son Shechem is the one who in Genesis 34 rapes Jacob's daughter Dinah, or you might call her Dinah, but it's Dinah. He rapes Dinah. One of the horrible, horrible, messy stories in the book of Genesis. A horrible thing. Shechem, the son of the founder, Shechem, a Canaanite, rapes Jacob's daughter. Well, then, in the story of the 2 sons, retaliate by killing all the men of the city. That's part of the whole story in Genesis 34. Now, it says he goes back to Shechem to his mother's brothers. Now, I'm not going to show any messy kids in this chapter because the whole chapter is a mess. In fact, I'm not even going to... Abimelech, I wonder why he's even in here, because he's not really somebody that God's going to use. But this is just to show you how messy this time is. He goes to his mother's brothers. Now, so just like today, the average family can get pretty messy. Abimelech has two sides to his family. There's his daddy's side. His daddy is who? Gideon. And he's got his mama's side. So a little girl asks her father, how did the human race come about? And the father says, well, God made Adam. They had children, and so all mankind was made. 2 days later, she asks her mommy the same question. She says, Mother, how did the human race come about? And the mother says, well, many years ago, there were monkeys, and we developed from them. The confused girl returns to her father and says, Dad, how is it possible that you told me that the human race was created by God, and Mom says they were developed from monkeys? And the father said, well, that's simple, honey. I told you about the origin of my side of the family, and your mother told you about her side. Yeah, that one doesn't fly. Okay. So Abimelech's going back home to appeal to his mother's side of the family. And I would like to suggest to you that because she is a concubine from Shechem, I believe she's a Canaanite. I believe she's a Canaanite. The whole story makes a lot more sense. I believe she's a Canaanite. We don't know that for sure. That's just Pastor Rich's hunch. And you can keep it or toss it, do whatever what you want with it. Verse 3. And his mother's brothers. His mother's brothers. Because see, the whole idea is, well, who do you want to rule over you? You want these 70 sons of Gideon? Or how about if we come up with a plan and your own kid, me, rules over everybody? How do you like the sound of that? Who do you want to be president in the United States? The governor of California or the governor of New Jersey? Well, of course we want sorry, that's not a good question, is it? Well, but it's that idea. Everybody votes for if your governor's running, we want to do that. What's the idea? Verse 3. So his mother's brothers spoke all these words concerning him in the hearing of all the men of Shechem, and their heart was inclined to follow Abimelech. For they said, he is our brother. So they kind of like this idea. Yeah, we like the idea. We'll vote for you. So they gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal-Berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men, and they followed him. So the money's going to come from Baal-Berith. 70 shekels. By the way, it's going to be 1 shekel for every son that they kill. Worthless men that follow him. So it is kind of a little irony. Here's a little bit of an irony you might not pick up. Gideon's name, Jerubbaal, means contend with Baal. He's fighting against Baal because he tore down his altars. Abimelech is financed by Baal. This message was brought to you by Baal. Kind of ironic, isn't it? Talk about messy. Verse 5. Then he went to his father's house at Ophrah. So that's where the center is right now. The 70 sons are there. And he killed his brothers, the 70 sons of Jerubbaal, on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left because he hid himself. Remember Jotham, because we're going to see him in a minute. So he kills his brothers. He eliminates all the competition. Not really a fair election, which is going to kill everybody else. Nobody actually votes. And so, but one son does survive. So, there's a picture here, and I'm going to call this lesson, How to Become a Leader. There have been others in biblical history who got their position in this kind of manner. Athaliah was one of the queens of the nation of Judah. She killed all her kids and grandkids so that she could rule the nation. When her son dies, she says, well, I think I can do better than anybody. She kills all of her offspring. Absolutely. Could you imagine a grandmother killing her grandchildren? That is just like unbelievable. But she does it to get power. Herod the Great, it was said that it was safer to be a pig in Herod's household than to be his wife or his son, because he had them all killed out of paranoia. One of David's sons, Absalom, does it a little different. He tries to gain power through a different kind of manipulation. In 2 Samuel 15:5 it says, and so it was whenever anyone came near to bow down to him, that he would put out his hand and he would take him and kiss him. And he would, and it says, he turned the hearts of the people by just kissing up to everybody. And then he went around, and then he eventually would turn or rebel against his father and try to kill his father. But he was unsuccessful. Jesus showed us a different way of becoming a leader. Jesus called them to himself, his disciples, and he said to them, you know that those who are considered rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you shall be your servant. And whoever of you desires to be first shall be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. That's a little different way of becoming a leader. And let me just give you a warning here. Some people might think to themselves, well, who cares how I become a leader? Once I become a leader, then I'll be good. No. So I think the way that you become, the way you start, will affect the way that you finish. So you want to be careful that you do things God's way, which is cultivating humility and learning to serve others. Verse 6. But that's not Abimelech. He just goes out and kills all the competition. Verse 6. And all the men of Shechem gathered together, all of Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech king beside the terebinth tree at the pillar that was at Shechem. Beth Millo mentions the men of Beth Millo. Beth Millo means house of fortress. This is the name of a section of the city of Shechem, which I'm going to suggest has a tower located in it. We will see this later. Hold that for future reference. And so they make Abimelech king. So in a way, if you want to, this is a Bible trivia thing, if you want. Who was the first king of Israel? Well, you could say it was Abimelech. It says they made him king. But not really. He was only kind of a king. And in fact, if I was to say who was the first king that God will choose, it's Saul. Some people would say David, but really God was involved with the choosing of Saul as well. Different reasons. David's going to be the one after God's own heart. He's the guy eventually, but Saul is and we're talking a little ways down the road from this point. Verse 7. So, remember Jotham, the last remaining son of Gideon, the youngest. And so when they told Jotham, he went and stood on top of Mount Gerizim and lifted his voice and cried out. And he said to them, listen to me, you men of Shechem, that God may listen to you. Now, Gerizim is one of the hills that overlooks Shechem, the city of Shechem. The city is kind of down in between a bunch of hills. It's almost like in the middle of a natural amphitheater. And I want to show you a video from 3 years ago when we were up on Mount Gerizim. This is in the West Bank, so you have to cross into Palestinian land. And we were up on top of Mount Gerizim, and I'm going to explain what you're seeing in it. We're going to see Mount Ebal, which is the other big mountain. It's going to be right across from us. Shechem is down in the valley. Today, Shechem is called Nablus. You'll see that in the news. It's a major Palestinian city, Nablus. And there will be another city, another little hill I'm going to point out, because it will come into play later in the story, called Morah. But here we are. We're up on top of Gerizim. This is Mount Ebal over here, and this stuff in here is the city of Shechem. Right here, this is the ancient Shechem. This is where the oldest part is, right here. And right up in here is this hill called Morah. And then this is the modern city of Nablus. Oh, I'm sorry, Morah is right here, the little hill called Morah. This is from the top of Gerizim. So he's up on this hill. Now, I don't know that he's up as high as we are. But the idea is you can get up on this hill and you can shout across. It's even built into the book of Deuteronomy. That they were supposed to do this when they first came into the land. Half of the people would be on Mount Gerizim, half would be on Mount Ebal, and they would recite back and forth the blessings and the cursings of the law while the covenant was there in the middle. And they did this in the book of Joshua. So he's up on Gerizim, and he's shouting to these men of Shechem who have financed and supported Abimelech's murderous spree. And he's going to tell them a story. Verse 8. The trees, we could call this a parable. The trees once went forth to anoint a king over them. And they said to the olive tree, reign over us. Now we might think of the olive tree as being beneficial because it has olive wood. We like olive wood and the carvings from olive wood. Do you? Well, kinda. We like olives. We like them on our pizza, But that's not why the Israelites liked olive trees. It's because olive trees produced olive oil. And that's the chief fuel in the Middle East is olive oil. So it's kind of the chief of the trees. And so the trees all gather together and say to the olive tree, reign over us. But the olive tree said to them, should I cease giving my oil with which they honor God and men and go to sway over the trees? And the trees said to the fig tree, you come and reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, should I cease to my sweetness and my good fruit and go to sway over the trees? Then the trees said to the vine, you come and reign over us. But the vine said to them, should I cease my new wine, which cheers both God and men, and go to sway over trees? Then all the trees said to the bramble, a thorn bush, you come and reign over us. And so they finally asked the bramble, the thorn bush, to rule over them. And he's telling a story about the people of Israel going to various leaders trying to say, rule over us. And the most qualified people all turn them down. And they end up with the most worthless thing. The thing that's really only good for one thing, to burn. And the bramble said to the trees, if in truth you anoint me as king over you, then come and take shelter in my shade. It's kind of funny because bramble bush is probably the shortest. And so all the trees are going to come in under its shade? Really? Really? How's that work? Then come and take shelter in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. Now therefore, if you have acted in truth and sincerity, this is Jotham now speaking to the people. If you have acted in truth and sincerity in making Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done to him as he deserves, for my father fought for you, risked his life, delivered you out of the hand of Midian, but you have risen up against my father's house this day, and killed his 70 sons on one stone, and made Abimelech, the son of his female servant, king over the men of Shechem, because he's your brother. If then you have acted in truth and sincerity with Jerubbaal and with his house as this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come from Abimelech and devour the men of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come from the men of Shechem and from Beth Millo and devour Abimelech. And Jotham ran away and fled, and he went to Beer. We don't know where that is. And dwelt there. Beer means a well. We don't know what place. And he dwelt there for fear of Abimelech, his brother. And so, just as in this parable, Jotham is warning that Abimelech and the people of Shechem are going to end up destroying each other. So remember that. Remember that this thing about fire, because it's kind of comes into the story. Verse 22. After Abimelech had reigned over Israel 3 years, God sent a spirit of ill will between Abimelech and the men of Shechem. He just kind of stirred them up a little bit. Kind of pinched them, made them uncomfortable. Probably gave them headaches or something, And the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech, that the crime done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might be settled, and their blood be laid on Abimelech, their brother, who killed them, and the men of Shechem, who aided him in the killing of his brothers. So God lets things go for 3 years. He just lets it ride for 3 years. And then God kind of stirs things up. Starts kind of stirring, and they kind of start looking at each other funny, And the men of Shechem set men in ambush against him on the tops of the mountains, and they robbed all who passed by them along the way. And it was told Abimelech. So somehow the men of Shechem are starting to disrupt. They're robbing people on the trade routes. They're robbing the merchants and all. Now, Gaal, in Hebrew, there are no diphthongs. That's where two vowels are formed together and change the sound of something like. So when you see this G-A-A-L, don't say Gale, like we might say. Whenever you see two vowels in a Hebrew word, you pronounce each vowel separately. That's why it's Baal, even though we want to say Baal. It's Baal. Here, it's not Gale, it's Gaal. Now, Gaal, the son of Ebed, came with his brothers and went over to Shechem, and the men of Shechem put their confidence in him. Now, Gaal, his name means loathing. And while Abimelech, this is my theory, he might actually be half Canaanite. Could be. Or he could be no Canaanite. But he wouldn't be more than half Canaanite because his daddy is Gideon, okay? But Gaal is full Canaanite. He's full Canaanite. He's the homeboy. And he also has a lot of gall. Okay, at least two people got it. Okay, 3 people. Okay. Verse 27. So they went out into the fields and gathered grapes from their vineyards and trod them and made merry. They went into the house of their God and ate and drank and cursed Abimelech. So the fact that they're gathering grapes, the grape harvest takes place in summer. So that's we can point this as in the calendar around summer. And they're all drunk. Okay? They're having a drunken party and they're just cursing Abimelech. Then Gaal, the son of Ebed, said, "Who is Abimelech and who is Shechem that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal and is not Zebul his officer? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem. But why should we serve him?" Talking about Abimelech. Now, he mentioned Zebul. Zebul is the current, you might think of him as the mayor of Shechem, and he's also a friend of Abimelech. But he's the mayor of Shechem, and he's loyal to Abimelech. He says, why should we be serving Abimelech? We should serve the men of Hamor. Do you remember who Hamor is? He's the ancient founder, the original founder of the city back in the days of Jacob. Remember the story back in Jacob's day, whose son was named Shechem. So he's the original founder. And he's encouraging the people, let's go back to our Canaanite roots. Let's get all these foreigners out of here. And let's just band together as Canaanites, okay? Verse 29. If only this people were under my authority, this is Gaal speaking, then I would remove Abimelech. So he said to Abimelech, increase your army and come out. When Zebul, this ruler of the city, heard the word, now he's not really speaking to Abimelech. He's just shouting it out in the world. And Zebul, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, the son of Ebed. His anger was aroused, and he sent messengers to Abimelech secretly, saying, take note, Gaal, the son of Ebed, and his brothers have come to Shechem, and here they are fortifying the city against you. Now therefore get up by night, you and the people who are with you, and lie in wait in the field. And it shall be as soon as the sun is up in the morning that you shall rise early, rush upon the city, and when he and the people who are with him come out against you, you may do to them as you find opportunity. So Zebul sends a message, and he passes on to Abimelech all this plot from Gaal, and even tells him what to do. Come during the night, and in the morning get down close to the city, and then you can attack. So Abimelech and all the people who were with him rose by night, lay in wait against Shechem in 4 companies. When Gaal, the son of Ebed, went out and stood in the entrance of the city, Abimelech and the people who were with him rose from lying in wait. And when Gaal saw the people, he's watching these guys come down out of the hills. He says to Zebul, look, people are coming down from the tops of the mountains. But Zebul said to him, oh, you see the shadows of the mountains as if they're men. He's trying to stall because he's trying to get. It's early in the morning. There's a lot of shadows. He's trying to get. He's trying to get Gaal to just wait a little bit. Wait, you're just seeing shadows. Then, so Gaal spoke again and said, see, people are coming down from the center of the land, and another company is coming from the diviner's terebinth tree. Now, this is kind of just a cool thing this is probably stupid to you. It just a little light bulb went on today. Diviner's terebinth tree. In Genesis 12:6, Abraham comes to Shechem, and he makes a stop at the terebinth tree of Moreh. That's Genesis 12:6. Moreh was that hill that I pointed out. And I only know this because I cut out the audio. I have two versions of that video that I showed you of us panning across. I have one with audio of me pointing things out. And then I took another one and just stripped out the audio. But in my audio, I'm pointing out, and here's this hill called Moreh, which we think was connected to Abraham. And yet, here there's a connection even back in the days of Abimelech. It just seems, it's a stupid thing, I know, but sorry. Patting myself on the back here. Here we go. Okay, and by the way, there's two hills of Moreh. There was one during the Midianite fight back in the Valley of Jezreel, and there's this other one here up near the city of Shechem. Let's move on. I'm boring you to tears. Okay, verse 38. But I got to tell you this, gang, the Bible's real. All these details, and we look at this stuff and we just kind of glance by it. What's the thing about the diviners, the terebinth? What's that all for? It's because it's real. It's a real place. And when you go to Israel, you see all these real places. You know, the Book of Mormon, all these amazing fantasy stories of things that supposedly happened in the Americas. You know, they can't point to a single place that has any archaeological anything to it. It's all make-believe. The Bible isn't make-believe. These are real places, real people. Okay, enough ranting. So, where am I? Verse, 38? Okay, 38. Then Zebul said to him, yeah, so Zebul is talking to Gaal, and they're still in the city. He says, where indeed is your mouth now with which you said, who is Abimelech that we should serve him? Are not these people whom you despise? Go out, if you will, and fight with him now. Come on, buddy. Let's, put your money where your mouth is. Talk is cheap. So Gaal went out, leading the men of Shechem, and fought with Abimelech. And Abimelech chased him, and he fled from him, and many fell wounded to the very entrance of the gate. Then Abimelech dwelt at Arumah. That's a city to the south. It's to the south, Arumah, 4 miles to the south. And Zebul drove out Gaal and his brothers so that they could not dwell in Shechem. So Zebul blocks the gates, keeps him from coming back into Shechem, and Abimelech chases them on down the road. Verse 42, then it came about on the next day that the people went out to the field, and they told Abimelech. So the people think the battle's over, and they go back to harvesting their vineyards. And so word gets to Abimelech that the people are back out in the fields again. But you know what? Abimelech doesn't want to just get Gaal. He hates the people of Shechem. So when he finds out that they're outside of the city, outside the protection, out getting, plucking grapes, he took his people, divided them into 3 companies, and lay in wait in the field. And he looked, and there were people coming out of the city, and he rose against them and attacked them. Then Abimelech and the company that was with him rushed forward and stood at the entrance of the gate of the city, and the other 2 companies rushed upon all who were in the fields and killed them. And Abimelech fought against the city all that day. He took the city and killed the people who were in it, and he demolished the city and sowed it with salt. That makes a land worthless. You can't plant anything. You can't grow anything if you put salt throughout it. And by the way, archaeology has confirmed this 12th century BC destruction of Shechem. And then he says, verse 46, and when all the men of the tower of Shechem had heard that, they entered the stronghold of the temple of the god Berit and told it to Abimelech that all the men of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. I think this is that tower at Beth Millo that we talked about earlier back in verse 6. Then Abimelech, and so this is kind of like the stronghold of the city. Then Abimelech went up to Mount Zalmon, he and all the people who were with him, and Abimelech took an axe in his hand, cut down a bough from the trees, took it up and laid it on his shoulder, and said to all the people who were with him, what you see me do, make haste and do as I've done. So all the people likewise each cut down his own bough and followed Abimelech and put them against the stronghold and set the stronghold on fire above them so that all the people of the tower died, about 1,000 men and women. So remember, Jotham's prophecy that let fire come from Abimelech and destroy the people of Shechem and Beth Millo, and then he's going to say, and vice versa, let them. And here it is, 1,000 people die in the fire. Little point I want to make, I'm going to call it leaders we deserve. Remember, the whole reason for Abimelech becoming king was because of the help that he got from Shechem in killing all of Gideon's sons. And someone has said, I don't remember who said this, but we get the leaders we deserve. And Proverbs 14:34 says, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. I don't know if you get frustrated at things that happen in our government. And we can get all mad at this party or that party. But I think there's some truth to this idea that we get the leaders we deserve. And I think the way, if we want a better government, we need revival in the United States. We need God to work at the grassroots level more than we need the leaders to change. Because if God works at the grassroots level, then you will see change up the ladder, I think. We need to be a nation that follows the Lord. So verse 50, then Abimelech went to Thebez. He encamped against Thebez and took it. He wants to expand his kingdom, takes another city. And Thebez is to the north, and there was a strong tower in the city, and all the men and women, all the people fled there, shut themselves in. Then they went to the top of the tower. Abimelech came as far as the tower, fought against it. He drew near the door of the tower to burn it with fire. Hey, I know what to do with towers. We've done this before. We just did this with Shechem. We can do this. But a certain woman dropped an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and crushed his skull. I don't think this is the big giant kind of millstones that you might see. In Israel, in Capernaum, they have these little individual home flour mills that are little things that they're still hefty things. They probably still weigh 15, 20 pounds, these stones. So it's still pretty heavy. She drops this upper millstone and kills him. Or, well, crushes his skull. She doesn't kill him. Then he called quickly to his young man, his armor bearer, and said to him, draw your sword and kill me, lest men say of me, a woman killed him. So his young man thrust him through, and he died. So, okay, technically it wasn't a woman. I call this live in the truth. Abimelech's a guy who lives for appearances. He wants to look good, even in his death. Jesus said there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, nor hidden that will not be known. We try to keep things secret, but they always have a way of leaking out, don't they? And he wanted, kill me so nobody knows a woman killed me. It was right here in the story, buddy. Sorry, it didn't work. An elderly couple were attending a church service, and about halfway through the service, the wife writes a note to her husband that says, I just let out a silent fart. What do you think I should do? And he scribbles back, put a new battery in your hearing aid. Takes a second. Maybe it wasn't silent. Real growth, friends, come when we learn to embrace the truth. Not pretend and not tell ourselves stories. Ephesians 4:15 says, speaking the truth in love, that's how we grow up. Sometimes the truth is embarrassing, sometimes the truth hurts. But when we embrace the truth and we admit it, that's how we grow. So verse 55, the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead. They departed, every man to his own place. Thus God repaid the wickedness of Abimelech, which he had done to his father by killing his 70 brothers. And all the evil of the men of Shechem, God returned on their own heads, and on them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Zerubbabel. God returned this on their own heads. You know, I haven't seen a lot of God mentioned in the last couple chapters. You know, I don't really hear much of God mentioned in Gideon's last chapter. You don't hear anything about God in Abimelech's chapter at all. Does that mean God wasn't working? No. God's still at work. He may be sometimes taking his time. He may be doing things a little bit behind the scenes, but God is still at work. That's it. Let's stand. Let's pray. You are a wonderful audience to sit through all of that. Let's stand and pray. Father, as we are working our way through this messy book, I pray, Lord, that you would be readjusting some of our ideas of how you want to work and the kind of people that you will work through. Because, Lord, sometimes we think that you only work through perfect people. And sometimes we exclude ourselves from that because we see all the mess in our lives. Lord, I pray that you'd help us to yield to your direction, to hear your voice, and to know, God, that you want to use each of us. As flawed as we are. Do your will, Lord. Have your way. Thank you. In Jesus' name. Amen. All right. God bless you. Yes.